So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to our President and Executive Director, Ken Patesy.
Thanks, Rick, and welcome to everybody. I want to thank Morris Hawk from Roetzel for joining us today. This is our second webinar in the last 3 business days as we try to stay on top of all the activity that's going on between the president, the federal legislation, and our governor here in Ohio. There are other opportunities to have people present to you on these topics, I understand. One of the things that we're intentionally doing is we're going to have it at sort of our 3 o'clock calls. Will typically be scheduled at this time so that those involved in manufacturing, we're catching you more towards the end of the day rather than the beginning and the end of it. So we'll try to hold to that. And we also want to look for opportunities to have our manufacturers communicate with one another and sort of discuss best practices. You'll find a blog on our website where we're initiating conversations there, but you will also see messages from us going forward where we're going to be trying to create forums for members to talk to one another, as well as to hear from the subject matter experts like Morris here today. And we do encourage you in these sessions as well to share your thoughts and start discussions between each other as well. This is open dialogue, and we're all here to learn. So thank you for being with us today, and I'll turn it back to Rick.
Thank you, Ken. So let me just tell you a little bit about our presenter here today. Mr. Morris Hawk focuses his practice on helping employers successfully navigate all legal aspects of the employment relationship. He advises employers on complying with federal and state employment laws and employee benefit law. He represents employers in traditional labor relations law before the National Labor Relations Board, in collective bargaining, including arbitration, and in union avoidance. Mr. Hawk also represents employers in workers' compensation matters throughout Ohio, and we are very, very fortunate to have him on the line today. So without further ado, Mr. Morris Hawk.
Hello, everyone. Can everyone hear me?
Loud and clear.
Perfect. All right. Well, thanks for everyone showing up. I mean, obviously, this is an area that's really rapidly changing. But today, what I'd like to do is sort of spend some time on the stay-at-home order that was issued by Governor DeWine yesterday, and explain sort of how that order is going to work. And then after that, we'll touch on briefly on ADA issues related to this, to the COVID-19, and then how the new paid sick leave and paid FMLA caregiver leave law works, and finally talk about the tax credits, although the information about the tax credits might last only as long as it takes the Congress to pass new legislation on this matter. But let's start first with the stay-at-home order. And again, feel free to ask questions through the chat. This is, I'm happy to answer any questions anyone has. So let's, first of all, Ann, could you move to the next slide? So thanks. So yeah, the stay-at-home order's effective tonight, and it goes through April 6th. If you need a copy of the order, you can email me and I'll be happy to send it to you. It's pretty widely available at this point. But essentially, it requires residents of the state of Ohio to stay at home unless they are engaging in essential activities, essential governmental functions, and essential business operations. So if we could jump to the next slide. For this group, the real issue is, well, how does it affect me as a manufacturer? I mean, if you've read the order, it's very broadly worded. And essentially, if you're a manufacturer, if you produce and supply products for a wide variety of industries, then you're going to be allowed to continue to function as an essential business. The order lists those functions: pharmaceutical, technology, biotechnology, healthcare, chemicals, and sanitation. I won't go through all of them here because you can read the slide. But in addition to those specific industries, there's language that I've bolded, as well as products used by other essential businesses. And if you move to the next slide, you can see that other essential businesses is frankly pretty much everything. Stores selling groceries, food, beverage, charitable service organization, gas stations, businesses used for transportation, financial institutions, hardware and supply stores, the skilled trades and supplies for them, mail and delivery services and supplies for them, schools, laundry services, restaurant takeout. If you could move to the next slide. Supplies to work from home, and what I've bolded, supplies for essential business operations. So that's our view is that takes it down pretty much all the way down the supply chain as to whether you're an essential business operation. If you are supplying product that another entity is supplying to an essential business operation, in the sense that, so you're in the supply chain, then under this order, you're going to be characterized as an essential business operation and allowed to continue. Just to continue, there's transportation, home-based care and services, residential facilities, professional services, hotels and motels, funeral services. So it's a very wide array of industries that are considered essential business operations. And obviously, if you are directly engaged in that, you're an essential business operation. If you're in the supply chain for that, you're also considered to be an essential business operation.
Morris, we're having a little bit of trouble hearing you. Could you try to talk right into the mic and speak a little louder, please?
Sure, I'm sorry. I'll move forward. Is this a little bit better?
It does sound better. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, I'm sorry. Sometimes I start moving around. So if you could jump to the next slide. So some of you maybe have already received notices from your customer where the customer is notifying you that it's an essential business operation and that it considers you a supplier to an essential business operation. That's not a requirement under Ohio's stay-at-home order. You don't need to file something with the state to say you're essential business operation, at least at this point. But certainly it helps to have something from your customer telling you that you are an essential business part of the essential business operation. We are also recommending, and this isn't a requirement either, but some of our clients have said, well, can I give my employees a piece of paper, something that tells them that I, as their employer, are an essential business operation. The state's not requiring that, but our clients have think, and we agree that that provides some measure of comfort for your employees. That if you give them sort of just a simple notice that identifies you as a manufacturing entity as an essential business operation, that gives them comfort to travel to and from work, to know that they have that in case someone questions why they're out on the public roads. And the other point we're making is it's not a requirement now, but things are happening very fast. So it might be by the end of the week that it will be a requirement, that our employees might need to carry some documentation to prove that they're entitled to be out on the roads. So we're recommending that if you choose to do that, that it makes sense, and it might be helpful down the line, even if it's not technically required right at the moment. Oh, and here comes I see the slides just kind of coming back in. Okay, and if you can move to the next slide. The one series of requirements for all employers, if they are going to continue as an essential business operation and stay in operation during this period of time, is that they must maintain social distancing requirements. The order sets those out in detail. I'm going to go over them in detail now, because this is really, in my view, the essential part of the order. The order was very broadly worded, I think, intentionally, obviously intentionally, by Governor DeWine and the state to allow a business to continue in a wide variety of areas, but if they're going to allow that, so long as they're assured that employers are operating with these social distancing requirements as a part of their operations to try to prevent the spread of this disease, this virus. So I'm just going to kind of walk through these. Employees on the premises have to maintain 6 foot of distance from each other. Same for customers. If customers enter your premises, in fact, it's even more important if you have people coming in from the outside, they are notified as they enter your facility that there's going to be a 6 foot requirement. So there should be signage posted at all facilities so employees are reminded. I don't think it has to be anything fancy. It can just be something that you print out on a piece of paper and post throughout the facility, but you're going to need to post that so people are reminded that they need to keep their distance from each other. Hand sanitizers must be readily available. Remote work is, to the greatest extent possible, should be permitted. If applicable, if you are a business where there are public people entering, and I'm sure most folks here that doesn't apply to, but if it does, separate operating hours for the elderly and vulnerable population. And we need to actively encourage employees to remain home if sick. I mean, that's another very important part of the order. And if okay, yeah, I wanted to make sure that the rest of this popped up because it's important. Because the one thing the state order does is specifically lay out what the physical condition of an employee in order for them to be allowed to return to work. So number one, they've got to be fever-free for 3 full days. The symptoms have to have improved for 3 full days. And there needs to have passed 7 days since their symptoms began. So if someone's out work sick, they cannot return under the order until all 3 of these requirements are met. The other issue thing that's specifically raised is, at least between now and April 6th, the state is saying that no doctor's note is going to be required for those calling out due to sickness, because of the substantial impact on the healthcare industry because of treating people infected and testing people who might be infected. The order says that from a human resources perspective, we're not going to be able to require people to give us a doctor's note to document that they are exhibiting symptoms or to document that they've been diagnosed or to document that they've been ordered to quarantine. Obviously, that puts us, I mean, we're going to have to depend at least on between now and April 6th on the good faith of the employees, to be honest, and assessing their health or their sickness. If you can move to the next slide, thanks. The other things the state wants us to do: ensure your sick leave policies are up to date. Consider, it's not a requirement, but to consider having employees do self-assessments each day and report those self-assessments, specifically fever, cough, shortness of breath. Governor DeWine, in his actual statement on Sunday, recommended taking temperatures of employees if you have the capability to do that. It's not a requirement. I think from a practical perspective, most of us are not going to be able to. I think self-assessments are realistic. I'm not sure anyone's ready to take temperatures of everybody, but certainly it's a good idea. If someone shows up with acute respiratory illness, you have to send them home. That's clear. I mean, it's clear in the order, and it's just clear common sense, given how this spreads and how easy it spreads. Also, a requirement to, if you remain open, you got to frequently perform environmental cleaning of the commonly touched surfaces. And workstations, countertops, railings, door handles, doorknobs. You need to provide disposable wipes by these surfaces so employees can wipe them down during the day after they use them. I'm sure everyone's been keeping abreast of what we're learning about COVID-19, but one of the things that's clear is that the virus lives for a significant period of time on hard surfaces, specifically on metal surfaces, and railings. So if we are going to try to keep the spread keep COVID from spreading to the extent we can, then we need to make sure that we clean those commonly touched surfaces regularly. And again, the final thing, frequent hand washing and coughing and sleeve. I mean, I think that's been pretty much standard procedure for everyone at this point. But again, it's if we're gonna stay operating, these are the things that we must do. If you could go to the next slide. Yeah, minimum basic operations. If you do shut down, you can maintain minimum basic operations, which is essentially just a skeleton crew to maintain the value of the business inventory, preserve the plant, equipment, do security, process payroll and benefits. I think the order's worded broadly enough that a lot of people or a lot of businesses will be able to classify as essential business operations. When I think of who might shut down, I'm assuming there's probably some suppliers to the auto industry whose customer might have shut down. I know in the tire industry, Goodyear is in the process of shutting down. Bridgestone has, Cooper Tire has, So I'm assuming that there's going to be suppliers to those entities that are going to be shut down just because their customers aren't working. But if you're in that boat, then you can maintain a skeleton crew for minimum basic operations. If you could go to the next slide. So enforcement. The order provides for state and local law enforcement and classifies it as a minor misdemeanor to be in violation. I mean, if you listen to Governor DeWine and frankly, if you read the order and how broadly it's written, this is essentially the honor system. But I think that's why it's so important that if you continue to operate, you do so under social distancing requirements. Because I think if we're a week into this and the state's looking around and they see people operating without being safe, or there's complaints about employers who aren't really doing anything to abide by social distancing, then we might get a second order that does shut everyone down and turns a lot of this and makes it enforceable. I know I was reading this morning about what South Korea did. When South Korea decided that they were going to shut down areas that were infected, they imposed an $8,000 fee on individuals. So in South Korea, if I'm sitting in my home and I'm told to stay there, and the police found me outside of my home, I would have been fined $8,000. I hope it doesn't get to that point here, but I think it's everyone's obligation to operate under these guidelines to make sure that we don't force the governor's hand and end up with something draconian. Okay. Just wanted to briefly talk about ADA and COVID-19. The EEOC issued recent guidelines that are pretty basic, I would assume, but I wanted to run through them just to make sure everyone understands. It's okay to ask employees if they have symptoms. Ordinarily under the ADA, that's a prohibited topic, but given the CDC's order that this is a pandemic, the ordinary rules do not apply. So you can ask employees if they have symptoms, you can take their temperatures, you can send people home even if they want to keep working. You can screen applicants for COVID-19 or if they're having symptoms. I mean, there's not going to be testing available at this point for screening, but at some point it might become available. And you can refuse to hire or withdraw job offers for those with diagnosis or symptoms. Okay, the next, if we can move to the next thing. The new paid sick leave law. I did not have time to put the whole thing on this PowerPoint, but if you go to the Manufacturing Works resources links, you can link to my article on it, and we could talk about it. And just to kind of review how it works, there are two separate paid sick leave entitlements. The first is emergency paid sick leave. That is an entitlement for a full-time employee up to 80 hours of paid sick leave. This entitlement is in addition to any PTO that you currently have. Under the law, this is an additional, for a full-time employee, up to 80-hour full, up to 80-hour additional entitlement to paid time off. And thanks, Ann, for bringing my alert up. We can go through it. It makes it easier to go through. For emergency paid sick leave, for this 2-week entitlement, all current employees, including part-time employees, are eligible. There's no requirement that they have worked for you for any period of time. A current employee, even if it's a 1-day employee, is entitled to this. There are 6 different categories for someone to be entitled to. Number 1, employee is subject to a federal, state, or local quarantine or isolation order related to COVID-19. I want to make clear that that does not include someone who's staying at home under Governor DeWine's stay-at-home order. The stay-at-home order is not a quarantine or isolation order. A quarantine or isolation order only applies if you have someone, if there's a specific order for that employee to be quarantined. It doesn't apply in a circumstance where the governor's saying, everyone stay home, whether you're sick or not. So I want to make sure that's clear because there's a little confusion about that. But that first category only applies if you have an employee who is individually identified as someone that needs to be in quarantine or in isolation. The second category, employee's been advised by a healthcare provider to self-quarantine. Third, employee is experiencing symptoms of COVID-19 and is seeking a medical diagnosis. So under those 3, if someone meets one of those 3 requirements, and they are entitled, if they are a full-time employee, to up to 80 hours of paid leave at their regular rate of pay. For numbers 4, 5, and 6, someone who's entitled to emergency paid sick leave under those 3, the 4, 5, and 6, is entitled to 2/3 their regular rate of pay. And those 4, 5, and 6 address caring for an individual who is subject to a quarantine order, caring for a son or daughter whose school's been closed, and then number 6 is a catch-all, experiencing any other substantially similar condition. That has not yet really been specified as to what that means. But essentially, the shorthand way to look at it is if it's for an employee's own sickness, 1, 2, 3, then it's the regular rate of pay. If the employee's off because he's caring for someone else, either someone who's sick or a child who's off from school, that's 2/3 regular rate of pay. And those are subject to caps, 511 per day, 5110 in the aggregate for the employee's own sickness, and 200 per day and 2,000 in the aggregate for an employee who's caring for someone else or taking care of a kid off school. Now, the other paid leave entitlement that was passed involves FMLA, Caregiver Leave, and it's and for that, for Caregiver Leave, it only applies in situation 4. Someone's entitled to Caregiver Leave only if they have to be off work due to their kid being out of school because the school's closed. So if an employee has to stay home because their kid is home because the school is closed, then that person, after the 2 weeks of emergency paid sick leave, is entitled to an additional 10 weeks of paid leave at 2/3 of their regular rate of pay, up to a cap of, again, 200 per day or 10,000 in the aggregate. So they're also, the Department of Labor is supposed to issue some regulations as to when someone with 50 employees or less can be excused from the paid leave obligation. They have not yet done so. We'll let you know if they do. So that's sort of the paid leave entitlement. For the employer tax credit, at this point in time, the way that would work, it's going to be on a quarterly basis, and you're entitled to a credit up to the caps. So you can have a policy that pays more than the caps for employees who need paid sick leave or emergency FMLA caregiver leave, but you're only entitled to a tax credit in the amount of the caps. And again, the way that tax credit works, or even then it might be, that might change with the new bill that's being considered in Congress right now. We'll just have to let you know. The other thing I would note with the paid sick leave and the caregiver leave, this is not effective at the moment. It's only effective on April 2nd. And it also doesn't address payments to employees in the event of a temporary layoff or furlough. If someone is laid off or furloughed due to the coronavirus, at this point in time, they should file for unemployment benefits. And even if, in my view, after April 2nd, even if this paid leave is in effect, if you shut down your entire business for a period of time, then the remedy for folks in the event that there's no work to go to because it's temporarily shut down is unemployment benefits. That doesn't entitle someone to paid sick leave. Paid sick leave assumes that the business is continuing to operate and there is a job to do if the employee was well enough to do it. So I wanted to sort of leave plenty of time for questions. So if I'm happy to take any questions that people have.
Thank you, Morris. Yeah, we do have a few questions that are in the chat. One of which it looks like you already answered. It just says, we have received many letters from our customers indicating they're an essential supplier and that our company is essential to their supply chain. So is that enough to substantiate remaining open as a business? And I believe you did say yes. That is correct?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
And then Federal Express has already challenged a shipment we were making today as to whether it was essential. Who has the authority to police shipments?
I'm not sure that that's clear at this point. I mean, it was, what were the circumstances that there was an order ready for ship and FedEx said we won't ship it?
Kathy, are you still on the call? She said yes.
I mean, that's a new one on me, to be honest with you.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, so Federal Express was supposed to pick up the shipment on Friday, and they didn't, even though our employees waited around until 6:30. They said then that they would come today, which they did. And when they came to pick up the shipment, even though the stay-at-home order doesn't even take effect until midnight tonight, they challenged whether it was an essential shipment or not. And I wondered if we're going to be running into this type of a problem ongoing as we ship things out. I mean, just because we stay open we've got a number of customers who are an essential business, does that mean we can only ship to those customers, or we can stay open and try to do business as usual, and we're staying open primarily to service those customers, but we do have other customers that maybe aren't essential?
Yeah, I mean, my view of the order is you can stay open, but you might be on your own with respect to doing business with customers who aren't essential business operations.
Okay.
I mean, I'm just kind of thinking it through. Was the FedEx, was this just like the people who showed up for FedEx? Were they the ones raising this issue?
Yes, it was like the driver of the truck. It was like a huge pallet of goods that we had to ship out. And like I said, they were supposed to come Friday before any of this even happened. They didn't come Friday. They show up today. And then they were giving our distribution people a little bit of problems. And I thought, is this going to happen every single time we go to ship something out, that we have to prove that it's an essential shipment?
I mean, I think you can maybe have a notification ready.
Okay.
To give to the shipper that says we are an essential business operation.
Okay.
So that might help avoid that. But yeah, I mean, I think that would be my recommendation at this point in time, that you just, if someone says that, then the shipping department has something saying, identifying and saying, we are an essential business operation.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate it.
Morris, this is Ken Patesy. I know OMA has posted on their site sample letters that people can use to send to their customers about getting this essential supplier designation, and also a sample to give to employees. Do you have such a sample that you might be able to provide to us that we could give to people?
Sure, I can email it to you.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, I could certainly email it to you, and then maybe you could distribute it to the group.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Sure.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, I think that's, I think it's helpful. You don't need, you know, the way the order is now, you can make your own decision as that you are an essential business operation, as long as you meet the requirements. You don't need a piece of paper, but I think it certainly helps.
Yeah, it sounds like other people may need it just to do business, right, rather than just the regulators.
Yeah, yeah. Certainly, if FedEx employees are trying to make unilateral decisions about this.
Right. Well, it's also FedEx might be covering their ass too by doing something like that too. You never know. That could have come down from the top.
Right. Yeah.
So Morris, we do have another question here. It says, do all employers get reimbursed for the emergency paid sick leave, or only employers with fewer than 50 employees?
No, everyone is entitled to the tax credit if you have under 500 employees, you're subject to the act. And I'm sorry, I just neglected to mention that. The paid sick leave and emergency FMLA paid leave apply if you have under 500 employees. The tax credit applies if you have under 500 employees. And again, that might change in the next couple days. There's been talk that this new bill is going to, rather than having it use a tax credit, is going to use some sort of funding mechanism for employers. So you get it on the front end rather than a tax credit. But I don't know at the moment. When I just got on, it looked like that the Senate rejected it didn't pass yet. So certainly I will let everyone know once we know the answer to that question.
Thank you. And it also says here to please verify that while the act takes effect on 4/2, the obligation to pay the leave begins on 4/12. Is that correct?
I believe it begins on 4/2. I think the effective date is 4/2. It was passed on the 18th.
Okay.
And it's effective 15 days after passage.
And then someone is posing a question, what about employers over 500 employees?
So far, again, they are not subject to this. Again, that's another thing that might change in the next couple days, that they're going to make everyone subject to these requirements. We'll just have to wait and see.
Yep.
I think that was just one of those things that in the moment last weekend, that was someone got that in the bill. But I wouldn't be surprised if that's one of the things that changes very quickly.
Thank you. And then there's another question here. It says, might not be a legal question, but maybe rather an employer best practice. But what are employers doing if an employees say that they've been in contact with someone who's been exposed? Are employers only looking at employee health, or are they also considering family health?
Well, I think that would potentially apply if you were exposed. I know we had an employee who was exposed and they were ordered quarantine. So I think if you are exposed, then you're going to fall under you're going to be subject to a self-quarantine order by a healthcare provider. So I would think that person would likely be, not someone you want to come into work.
Right. And so this kind of leads into the next question then. How do you verify under number 3, where it says something about the employee seeking a medical diagnosis? So how do you verify something like that they're actually seeking the diagnosis, and then when such a diagnosis is received?
I think between when you read that law with the new stay-at-home order, I think when this law becomes effective on April 2nd, at least through April 6th, we're going to have to take their word for it. Because the state's telling us that we can't ask for medical documentation. So if someone calls and says, I have symptoms and I'm seeking a diagnosis, I'm seeking a test, we're going to have to take their word for it. I mean, hopefully that will change. But that's where we're going to be from April 2nd to April 6th, at least at the current time.
Okay. Are there any other questions from the group that you would like to have asked and answered? Okay, I don't see anything else in the chat box right now. So I'll go ahead and just say thank you everyone for joining us on the call today. Thanks.
Rick, one more thing I wanted to add.
Yep, and that's good. We have a new message anyway.
Okay. If I do have a form, paid sick leave, paid emergency caregiver leave policy. If people would like that, they can contact me and I can get it to them.
Yeah, that's great. And I was just going to say, if you could, anything that you forward on to us for this group, then we will go ahead and place into that resources section of our website. So at any time, if anyone on this call has questions and that they are looking for answers for, by all means, go to the resource section of our website. Ann's bringing it up right now just so that you can see it, but there is a list of resources. It's a living, breathing document that will continue to be added as we find stuff that we feel is of importance to you. Looks like we do have a question here from Ben. It says, are there any grants available for rehiring leadership team that can be made available that you're aware of?
If there are any grants available for rehiring, I don't know that yet. I don't believe that there are yet, but I'm assuming that's going to be coming. I know, and the other thing that's going to be coming, hopefully, is the Department of Labor is going to explain how, if you're under 50 employees, you might be exempted from this act if you can show that you can't afford to do it. That if you have to pay sick leave, it's going to affect your viability as an ongoing entity. So hopefully that will also be coming.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for Morris from the group? Okay, well, with that being said, again, thank you all for joining us on the call, and thank you to Morris for sharing such valuable information. And we encourage you all to share with us your thoughts on topics that you would like to see covered in future calls like this. Feel free to email us, call us, and we will do our best to address them for you. Please stay tuned to your email as we announce our next call. And if there's other manufacturers in your network that you think would benefit from this information, by all means, feel free to share this with them or let us know, and we'd be happy to reach out to them. Thanks again, everyone. Stay safe, and we look forward to speaking with you soon. Have a great evening.